Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own marriage? Imagine standing in a room full of people laughing at you, holding the hand of a husband who is secretly plotting your destruction. That was Chloe's life. Her husband, Derek, thought he was the king of the world, a rising CEO with a flashy mistress and a plan to dump his boring wife. But Derek made one fatal mistake. He mocked Chloe's father for being a broke, old man in a tattered coat. He didn't know that the beggar he just kicked out actually owned the bank that held Derek's loans, the building they were standing in, and was the secret trillionaire buyer about to decide Derek's fate. This is the story of the most brutal, satisfying revenge you will ever hear. The chandeliers inside the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel in Manhattan were blinding, but not nearly as blinding as the diamond necklace draped around Sienna Cross's neck. Chloe stood near the entrance of the ballroom, clutching a glass of lukewarm water. She wasn't drinking tonight. She couldn't stomach the champagne, not with the knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. She adjusted the hem of her dress, a simple, navy blue A-line that she had bought off the rack at Macy's 3 years ago. It was elegant, but in a room filled with custom Versace and vintage Chanel, it screamed budget. Her husband, Derek Preston, was on the other side of the room. He was the man of the hour, the newly appointed CEO of Nexus Dynamics, a mid-sized tech logistics firm that was making waves on Wall Street. He looked impeccable in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, his teeth gleaming as he laughed at something Sienna whispered in his ear. Sienna was Derek's executive assistant. She was 24, sharp as a tack, and stunningly beautiful in a way that made other women instinctively check their reflection. She was wearing a backless scarlet gown that cost more than Chloe's first car. "He looks happy," a voice drawled beside Chloe. Chloe flinched and turned to see Mrs. Haversham, the wife of a board member. The older woman's eyes were pitying, which was worse than being ignored. "It's a big night for him," Chloe said softly, forcing a smile. "Being named CEO is all he's ever wanted." "I'm sure," Mrs. Haversham said, taking a sip of her martini. Though one might think he'd want to share that moment with his wife, rather than his staff. Chloe looked back at Derek. He had his hand on the small of Sienna's back. It was a gesture too familiar for a boss and an employee. It was possessive. Chloe walked over to them, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed to be the supportive wife. That's what Derek always told her. "Don't be dramatic, Chloe. Support me. Don't embarrass me." "It's some of their Derek," she said, approaching the circle of high-profile investors surrounding him. "Congratulations, honey." The conversation stopped. Derek turned, his smile faltering for a split second before freezing into a mask of polite tolerance. It was the look you gave a waiter who dropped a fork. "Ah, there she is," Derek said, his voice lacking any real warmth. "Gentlemen, this is Chloe." He didn't say my wife. Just Chloe. Sienna smirked, taking a tiny sip of her champagne. "Chloe, you made it." "I wasn't sure you'd pass the dress code check at the door. Security is so strict tonight." A few of the investors chuckled. It was a subtle dig, but it drew blood. "I'm his wife, Sienna," Chloe said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I don't need a ticket." "Of course not," Derek interjected quickly, eager to move the conversation away from her. "Chloe prefers the quiet life. She's not really built for this world. Domestic life suits her better. Cooking, cleaning. You know how it is." Actually, one of the investors, a man named Mr. Sterling, no relation, just a coincidence that stung, looked at Chloe. "I heard you have a background in finance, Mrs. Preston?" Chloe brightened. "I do. I actually graduated top of my class at community college," Derek interrupted loudly, laughing. "She took a few courses online. Let's not bore these men with your little hobbies, Chloe. Why don't you go check on the hors d'oeuvres? I think the waiters are running low on the shrimp tartlets." The humiliation washed over her like ice water. He was dismissing her. At his own celebration, he was treating her like the catering staff. Sienna leaned in, her voice low enough that only Chloe could hear. "Go on, Chloe. Let the adults talk business. Maybe grab a napkin for yourself. You look a little sweaty." Chloe felt tears pricking her eyes. She turned and walked away, the sound of their laughter following her like a pack of hyenas. She retreated to the balcony, gasping for air in the cold New York night. She looked out at the skyline. She had given Derek everything. She had supported him when he was a junior analyst living in a studio apartment in Queens. She had paid the bills while he finished his MBA. And now that he had made it, she was nothing but an embarrassing accessory he couldn't wait to discard. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. It was a text from her father, Walter. "Little Bear, I'm in the city. I know it's a big night. Can I stop by and say hello? I have something for Derek." Chloe closed her eyes. Her father lived in a small cabin in upstate Vermont. He was a retired mechanic, or at least that's what he had always told her and Derek. He lived a simple life, wore flannel shirts, drove a beaten-up 1998 Ford F-150, and smelled like sawdust and pine. Derek despised him. He called him the peasant. "Dad, please don't," she typed back. "It's not a good time." But before she could hit send, she saw a commotion at the main entrance of the ballroom. The double doors of the ballroom swung open, but not for a VIP guest. The chatter in the room died down, replaced by confused murmurs. Standing in the doorway was Walter Sterling. He looked exactly as Chloe feared he would. He was wearing a heavy, worn-out canvas coat that had seen better decades, faded jeans, and heavy work boots that left a faint trail of dust on the pristine marble floor. His gray hair was windblown, and he clutched a brown paper bag in his calloused hands. He looked like a homeless man who had wandered in off Fifth Avenue looking for soup. Security guards were already moving toward him, but Walter waved them off with a strange, effortless authority that made them hesitate. "Chloe?" Walter called out, his voice booming across the silent room. "I'm looking for my daughter." Derek's face turned a shade of purple Chloe had never seen before. He slammed his champagne glass down on a passing waiter's tray and stormed across the room, Sienna trailing close behind him like a shark sensing blood. Chloe ran to intercept them, but Derek was faster. "What the hell is this?" Derek hissed, stopping inches from Walter's face. "How did you get in here?" "Security. Why is this vagrant in my hall?" "Derek, wait!" Chloe breathless, grabbing Derek's arm. "It's my dad." "I know who he is," Derek spat, shaking her off. "That makes it worse. Look at him, Chloe. He looks like he just crawled out of a dumpster. We have the vice presidents of Goldman Sachs in this room. We have investors from Dubai. And you let your father walk in here looking like this?" Walter looked at Derek calmly, his blue eyes sharp and unblinking. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked disappointed. "I came to congratulate you, son," Walter said, his voice gravelly. "It's a big accomplishment. Running a company. I wanted to give you this." He held out the brown paper bag. It was stained with grease at the bottom. Sienna laughed, a shrill, cruel sound that cut through the tension. "Oh my God, Derek. Did he bring you a sandwich? That is adorable. Maybe he thinks you're hungry because he can't afford to feed himself?" The crowd chuckled. The tension broke, replaced by mockery. They weren't afraid of the intruder anymore. They were amused by him. "It's homemade apple pie," Walter said, ignoring Sienna. "Chloe's favorite. My grandmother's recipe." Derek slapped the bag out of Walter's hand. The room gasped. The bag hit the floor with a wet thud, the pie splitting open, spilling cooked apples and crust onto the polished floor. "I don't want your garbage," Derek snarled. "I don't want your pie, and I don't want you. You are a stain on this family. I have spent 5 years trying to scrub the smell of poverty off your daughter, and every time you show up, you drag us back down." "Derek!" Chloe screamed, tears finally spilling over. "That is enough." "No, it is not enough," Derek yelled, turning on Chloe. "I am done pretending, Chloe. Look around you. Do you think you belong here? Do you think he belongs here?" He gestured to Walter. "I am a CEO now. I make $3 million a year. I need a partner who fits the part. Not a mousy little housewife and her hobo father." He turned back to Walter. "Get out, before I have you thrown out." Walter looked down at the ruined pie, then back up at Derek. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, not a cheap tissue, but a monogrammed silk cloth, though in the dim light no one noticed the quality. He wiped his hand. "You're making a mistake, Derek," Walter said softly. "A very expensive mistake." "The only mistake I made was marrying into this trash family," Derek sneered. He snapped his fingers at the security guards. "Get him out of here. And Chloe, if you leave with him, don't bother coming back to the penthouse tonight. I'll have your bag sent to whatever trailer park he parked his truck in." Sienna looped her arm through Derek's, beaming with victory. Go on, Chloe. Go with Daddy. It's past your bedtime anyway. Chloe looked at her husband, the man she had loved, the man she had built up from nothing. She looked at Sienna, the woman stealing her life. And then she looked at her father. Walter wasn't looking at the floor in shame. He was looking at his watch. A Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chim, usually hidden under his fraying coat cuff. He adjusted it calmly. "Come, Chloe," Walter said, extending his hand to her. His voice was different now. It wasn't the voice of the kindly old mechanic. It was colder, harder. "We have places to be." "Places to be?" Derek laughed. "Where? The soup kitchen?" "No," Walter said, meeting Derek's eyes with a terrifying intensity. "A board meeting." "What board meeting?" Derek scoffed. "I am the board." "Not anymore," Walter said. He turned and walked toward the exit, his arm around a sobbing Chloe. As they reached the doors, Walter stopped and looked back at the security guard who had been about to grab him. "Don't touch me," Walter said. The guard froze. He didn't know why, but every instinct in his body told him that touching this old man would be the last thing he ever did in his career. As the doors swung shut behind them, the ballroom erupted into laughter. "What a psycho," Sienna giggled, resting her head on Derek's shoulder. "Talking about board meetings. He's probably senile." "Pathetic," Derek agreed, straightening his tuxedo jacket. "Waiter, clean up this mess on the floor. It smells like cheap apples." Derek thought he had won. He thought he had trimmed the dead weight. He had no idea that the hobo he just evicted had just initiated a hostile takeover of Nexus Dynamics on his phone while standing in the doorway. 30 minutes later, Chloe was sitting in the passenger seat of the Ford F-150. She was still crying, clutching the seatbelt. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she choked out. "I'm so sorry he spoke to you like that. I'm going to divorce him. I promise. I'll find a lawyer tomorrow." Walter didn't answer immediately. He was driving with one hand, his eyes focused on the wet asphalt of Fifth Avenue. But he wasn't driving toward the highway that led back to Vermont. He was driving toward the financial district. "Dad?" Chloe wiped her eyes. "Where are we going?" "The highway is north." "We aren't going home, little bear," Walter said. "I have to stop by the office." "The office?" Chloe was confused. "The mechanic shop is closed, Dad, and it's 4 hours away." Walter Seahith. He pulled the truck over to the curb. They were parked in front of a massive skyscraper, the Sterling Vanguard Tower, one of the most prestigious buildings in the city. It was a fortress of glass and steel that housed the headquarters of SV Global, the largest private equity firm in the Western Hemisphere. "Chloe," Walter said, turning to face her. "There are some things I haven't told you. Things I kept from you to protect you. I wanted you to find a man who loved you for you, not for my money. I wanted you to have a normal life." "What are you talking about?" "I'm not a mechanic, Chloe. I haven't fixed a car since 1985. Walter reached under the driver's seat and pulled out a sleek, black briefcase. He opened it. Inside wasn't a sandwich or tools. It was a tablet, a thick stack of legal documents, and a platinum American Express card that glinted in the streetlight. "My full name is Walter Vance Sterling, founder and majority shareholder of SV Global." Chloe stared at him. She knew the name SV Global. Everyone did. They bought countries. They owned airlines. They were the invisible hand behind half the Fortune 500. But the cabin? The truck? Camouflage, Walter said. "I like the quiet. And I like to see how people treat me when they think I have nothing to offer them. It's a very effective filter for character." His eyes hardened. Derek failed that test a long time ago. But tonight he declared war. Walter tapped the screen of the tablet. It lit up, showing a live stock ticker for Nexus Dynamics, Derek's company. "What is this?" Chloe whispered. "Derek thinks he's the CEO," Walter said calmly. "But Nexus Dynamics has been struggling with liquidity for months. They needed a bailout. They found a private buyer last week to purchase 51% of the controlling stock. The deal was signed anonymously." Chloe's eyes went wide. "Dad?" "No." "Yes," Walter nodded. "I bought his company, Chloe. I bought it last Tuesday. I was going to give it to him and you as an anniversary present. I was going to reveal myself tonight, retire, and let you two run it." He looked back at the tower. "But after what he did to you tonight? After he humiliated my daughter?" Walter put the truck in gear. "I'm not giving it to him. I'm going to bury him with it. The sun hadn't even peeked over the East River when the internal alarms at Nexus Dynamics began to blare, not the fire alarms, but the digital ones. Every executive's phone buzzed simultaneously at 6 a.m. Emergency board meeting. 8 a.m. Attendance mandatory. Derek Preston woke up with a pounding headache and a smug grin. He was tangled in the expensive silk sheets of his penthouse, the scent of Sienna's perfume still lingering in the air. Chloe hadn't come home last night. He didn't care. In his mind, she was out in the cold with her beggar father, probably crying in a motel room that smelled like mildew. Good riddance, he muttered, checking his reflection in the gold-rimmed mirror. Today was his first official day as the majority-controlled CEO. He felt invincible. He arrived at the office in a new Lamborghini, a celebratory gift he'd bought himself using the company's projected credit line. Sienna was already there, wearing a dress so tight it was barely professional, holding 2 lattes. "Big day, Mr. CEO, she purred, brushing her hand against his. "The biggest?" Derek said. "Let's go see what the board wants. Probably just want to kiss the ring now that the buyout is official." They walked into the boardroom on the 42nd floor. The air was thick with tension. The other board members, men like Arthur Sterling, no relation to Walter, and Harold Miller, were sitting in stony silence. At the head of the table, the high-back leather chair was turned toward the window, overlooking the city. "Gentlemen," Derek announced, throwing his briefcase on the table. "I know it's early, but I appreciate the enthusiasm. I assume we're here to discuss the transition of the new majority shares?" No one spoke. Arthur Miller wouldn't even look Derek in the eye. "What's with the long faces?" Derek chuckled, glancing at Sienna. "Did someone die?" In a manner of speaking, a voice said from the chair. The chair swiveled around. Derek's heart stopped. His latte slipped from his hand, splashing brown liquid across his Italian leather shoes. Sitting in the CEO's chair was the beggar, but it wasn't the man from the ballroom. This man was wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than Derek's car. His hair was perfectly groomed, his posture was regal, and his eyes, the same blue eyes that had looked so pathetic the night before, were now as cold as a mountain glacier. Next to him stood Chloe. She looked transformed. She was wearing a sharp, tailored white suit, her hair pulled back into a sleek bun. She looked like a woman who could buy and sell the building they were standing in. "You." Derek stuttered, his face turning a ghostly white. "What are you doing here?" "This is private property." "Security. How did this man get back in here?" "Sit down, Derek," Walter Sterling said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command that carried the weight of $1 billion. "I'm calling the police," Sienna snapped, reaching for her phone. "You're trespassing, you old." "I wouldn't do that, Miss Cross." Arthur, the senior board member, said quietly. "Mr. Walter Sterling is the chairman of SV Global. As of 5 p.m. yesterday, SV Global owns 51% of Nexus Dynamics. He doesn't just belong here, he owns here." The silence that followed was deafening. Derek felt the floor tilt beneath him. "Walter Sterling?" Derek whispered. The Trillionaire?" "The hobo with the apple pie," Walter corrected him, leaning forward. "The vagrant you had thrown out of your party. The poverty you tried to scrub off my daughter." Derek's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table to stay upright. "Chloe." "Honey, why didn't you tell me?" I was stressed. The pressure of the merger. I didn't mean those things." Chloe looked at him, and for the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel the need to apologize for her existence. She felt nothing but a cold, hard clarity. "You meant every word, Derek," Chloe said. "You didn't just insult my father. You insulted the man who paid for your degree. You insulted the man who anonymously funded your first 3 startups. My father didn't just buy your company yesterday, Derek. He's been your guardian angel for years. And you just spat in his face." "I can fix it," Derek pleaded, stepping toward her. "Chloe, we're a team. We can run this together. Think of the power we'd have." "There is no we, Derek," Walter interrupted. He slid a folder across the table. "These are the terms of the buyout. It includes a morality clause regarding the leadership of this company. Your behavior last night was witnessed by 42 high-profile investors. You didn't just embarrass yourself. You damaged the brand." Walter looked at the board. "As the majority shareholder, I am moving to terminate Derek Preston as CEO, effective immediately, for cause No severance. No stock options. No golden parachute. You can't do that, Sienna screamed. He has a contract. The contract he signed with the anonymous buyer me states that any gross misconduct resulting in public scandal is grounds for immediate termination, Walter said. Mocking the chairman of the parent company at a public gala? I'd say that qualifies. Derek looked around the room, searching for a single ally. But the board members were looking at their notebooks. They knew where the power was. Get out, Chloe said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. Chloe, please. I said, get out, Derek, she repeated. And take your assistant with you. Her position has also been eliminated. Turns out, we don't need an executive assistant whose only skill is picking out jewelry with company funds. Derek looked at Sienna, who was already backing away, looking for an exit. She wasn't a partner. She was a parasite, and she knew the host was dead. One more thing, Walter said as Derek turned to leave. The Lamborghini? The lease was tied to the CEO's expense account. I've already canceled it. There's a tow truck downstairs. And the penthouse? It's owned by a subsidiary of SV Global. You have 2 hours to clear out your things. Anything left behind will be donated to the soup kitchen you were so worried about me visiting. Derek Preston, the man who thought he was king, walked out of the boardroom with his head down, the sound of his own expensive shoes echoing like a funeral march. The sidewalk outside the Sterling Vanguard Tower was cold, but the chill Derek felt had nothing to do with the wind. He stood next to 2 cardboard boxes that contained the remnants of his empire, a framed MBA diploma, a stress ball, and a half-empty bottle of scotch he'd managed to snag before security escorted him out. He checked his phone, no messages from his friends, no calls from the investors who had toasted him the night before. The news of his firing had hit the Bloomberg terminals 3 minutes after he left the boardroom. In the corporate world, he was already a ghost. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Derek's heart leaped. Sienna. She hadn't abandoned him. She was coming to pick him up. The window rolled down. Sienna was in the passenger seat, but she wasn't driving. The driver was Mr. Sterling, Arthur Sterling, the board member who had watched Derek get fired without blinking. Sienna. Derek rushed to the window. Thank God. Pop the trunk. We need to get out of here. We can go to your place. Sienna didn't unlock the door. She looked at him through her designer sunglasses, adjusting her scarf. My place? My apartment is barely 800 square feet, Derek. Where would you put your boxes? We'll figure it out, Derek said, his voice rising in desperation. We're a team, remember? Us against the world. Sienna laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Derek, I liked you because you were a winner. I liked the penthouse. I liked the access. Standing on the sidewalk with a cardboard box? That's not really my brand. You. You can't be serious, Derek stammered. After everything? I left my wife for you. And look how well that turned out, she said coldly. She turned to the driver. Arthur, can we go? I have a reservation at Le Bernardin. Wait, Derek banged on the glass as the window rolled up. Sienna, you parasitic little. The car sped off, splashing a puddle of dirty water onto Derek's trousers. He was alone. Broke. Humiliated. But as he watched the taillights fade, the shock began to wear off, replaced by a burning, venomous rage. They thought they could discard him? They thought they could crush Derek Preston like a bug? He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he had saved for emergencies. It wasn't a friend. It was a lawyer named Marcus Thorne, a man known in New York as the Vulture. Thorne didn't handle mergers. He handled destruction. He specialized in defamation, extortion, and destroying reputations. Thorne. The voice answered on the first ring. It's Derek Preston. I want to sue Nexus Dynamics. I want to sue SV Global. And I want to sue Walter Sterling. You want to sue God? Thorne chuckled darkly. That's expensive, Derek. Do you have the capital? I don't have money, Derek hissed, staring up at the gleaming tower where his wife was currently sitting in his chair. But I have dirt. I know who the secret owner of SV Global is. I know he's been living in the woods like a lunatic for 20 years. Imagine what the market will do when they find out the world's biggest fund is run by a mentally unstable hermit. There was a pause on the line. Then, Thorne's voice dropped, sounding interested. Panic selling. The stock would tank. They'd pay a fortune to keep that quiet. Exactly. Derek smiled, his teeth bared like a wolf. I don't just want a settlement, Marcus. I want to burn their house down. 3 days later, Chloe was sitting in her father's office, formerly Derek's office, trying to make sense of the spreadsheets in front of her. Walter had been true to his word. He hadn't just handed her the company, he was making her learn it. He sat in the corner, reading a book on philosophy, while Chloe fielded calls from panicked department heads. You're doing well, Walter said, not looking up from his book. You have good instincts. You listen more than you speak. Derek never did that. I feel like an imposter, Chloe admitted, rubbing her temples. Dad, 3 days ago I was worried about coupon expiration dates. Now I'm deciding the fate of a logistics hub in Singapore. You're not an imposter, little bear. You're learning. Leadership isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing who to trust. The intercom on the desk buzzed. It was the new receptionist. Miss Sterling? There's a situation in the lobby. What kind of situation? It's Mr. Preston. And he brought a camera crew. Chloe froze. She looked at her father. Walter closed his book slowly, his expression darkening. He's desperate, Walter said calmly. Desperate men are dangerous. I'll handle it, Chloe said, standing up. I'll come with you, Walter offered. No, Chloe said, smoothing her skirt. She walked to the window and looked down at the street, where a small crowd was gathering. He thinks I'm weak, Dad. He thinks I'm the same woman who let him talk down to me for 5 years. If you go down there, he'll say I'm hiding behind my daddy. I need to face him. Walter looked at her, a swell of pride in his chest. Go get him. The lobby of Nexus Dynamics was chaos. Derek stood in the center of the atrium, flanked by Marcus Thorne and a cameraman from a notorious financial gossip blog. He looked disheveled on purpose, no tie, sleeves rolled up, playing the role of the man of the people crushed by the corporate elite. They threw me out. Derek was shouting to the camera, his voice echoing off the marble walls. I built this company from nothing. And then, out of nowhere, this shadow organization, SV Global, swoops in. And do you know who runs it? A man who hasn't been part of society for decades. A man who is mentally unfit to run a lemonade stand, let alone a $1 trillion fund. Employees were whispering, phones out, recording the spectacle. The elevator doors pinged open. Chloe stepped out. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She walked across the lobby with a steady, rhythmic click-clack of her heels that cut through the noise. Derek? She said, her voice calm. Derek spun around, the camera panning to catch her. Ah, the princess. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Chloe, the woman who got my job because of nepotism. He stepped closer to her, lowering his voice so the microphone barely caught it. You should have settled, Chloe. Now I'm going to tell the world that your father is crazy. The stock price is already dipping. How much will he lose by noon? $1 billion? $2 billion? What do you want, Derek? Chloe asked. $50 million. Derek smiled. Cash, tax-free, and a public apology stating that I resigned for creative differences. Do that, and the story goes away. Chloe looked at the camera, then at Marcus Thorne, then back at Derek. She felt a strange sensation. Fear? No. It was pity. You really don't get it, do you? Chloe said, loud enough for the onlookers to hear. Get what? Derek sneered. You think my father's privacy is a weakness, Chloe said, stepping into the space of the camera lens, addressing the audience directly. You think he lived in a cabin because he was crazy. He lived there because he was working. She pulled a remote from her pocket and pointed it at the massive digital screen that usually displayed the company logo in the lobby. The screen flickered and changed. It wasn't a stock chart, it was a video feed. But it was dated from 5 years ago. The video showed Derek sitting in a restaurant. He was laughing, drunk, talking to a man whose back was to the camera. I don't care about the product, video Derek slurred. I just need to pump the numbers for 3 years, find a buyer, and cash out. The logistics tech is garbage. It doesn't work. But if I wrap it in enough marketing, some idiot will buy it. The lobby went silent. The live light on the camera was still blinking. Derek's face went pale. Where did you get that? The man you were talking to? Chloe said. That was one of my father's scouts. SV Global doesn't just buy companies, Derek. They vet the character of the people running them. My father has been watching you for 5 years. He wanted to see if you would ever mature. If you would ever actually care about the work. Chloe stepped closer to him. He didn't buy the company last week because of me. He bought it to save the 4,000 employees you were planning to fire once you cashed out. He bought it to fix the tech you admitted was garbage. She turned to the camera. So, go ahead. Tell the world my father values privacy. Tell them he lives simply. While you do that, we'll show them the proof of your fraud. We have 5 years of recordings, Derek. We have the emails where you instructed engineers to fake the efficiency data. We have the text messages to your mistress, paid for with company funds. Marcus Thorne, the lawyer, slowly reached up and put his hand over the camera lens. Cut the feed, Thorne muttered. He looked at Derek with disgust. You didn't tell me about the fraud, Derek. It's not fraud. It's aggressive marketing, Derek squeaked. It's a federal crime, Chloe said softly. 2 men in suits walked in through the revolving doors. They weren't private security. They wore FBI windbreakers. Chloe looked at Derek. My father is a private man, Derek, but he believes in transparency when it comes to the law. He sent the files to the DOJ this morning. Derek looked at the FBI agents, then back at Chloe. His legs gave out. He collapsed onto the cold marble floor, not in protest, but in defeat. Chloe, he whimpered. Please. Goodbye, Derek, she said, turning her back on him. As she walked back to the elevators, she didn't look back. She heard the click of handcuffs. She entered the elevator, the doors closing, just as the agents hauled her screaming husband away. She let out a long breath, her hands shaking slightly. You okay? Walter asked as she walked back into the office. He had watched the whole thing on the security monitor. I will be, Chloe said. Is it over? Walter looked at the screen, watching the police car drive away. The battle is over, Walter said. But the war for your life? That's just beginning. He stood up and walked over to a safe in the wall. There is one more thing you need to know, Chloe. One last secret. Dad, please, Chloe laughed nervously. No more secrets. I can't take it. This isn't about money, Walter said, his face grave. He pulled out an old, tattered photograph. It's about your mother. And why I really went into hiding. The silence in the executive office was heavier than the noise had been. Only 10 minutes ago, the room had been a chaotic theater of shouting, flashing cameras, and the violent clicking of handcuffs. Now, it was a tomb. Chloe stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation with Derek was draining away, leaving her limbs feeling like lead. She looked around the office, Derek's office. The modern art on the walls, the pretentious sculptures, the humidor filled with cigars he didn't know how to smoke. It was a shrine to an ego that had just been shattered on live television. Walter stood by the window, watching the police cruiser merge into the chaotic traffic of Manhattan below. He didn't look triumphant. He looked tired. The weight of 20 years of hiding, of pretending to be a simple man with a simple life, seemed to be pressing down on his shoulders now that the mask was finally off. He's gone, Chloe whispered, the words feeling strange on her tongue. It's actually over. Walter turned slowly. The harsh office lighting caught the deep lines in his face. The spectacle is over, Chloe. The noise is over. But the truth? We haven't even started on the truth. Chloe frowned, walking over to the leather sofa and sinking into it. She felt small in the massive room. What do you mean? You told me you bought the company. You told me you were SV Global. You told me Derek was a fraud. What else is there? Walter walked over to the heavy oak desk, the desk he had paid for, the desk his enemy had sat behind, and picked up his briefcase. He set it down on the coffee table in front of Chloe with a deliberate, heavy thud. I told you the what, Walter said softly. I haven't told you the why. He sat down next to her, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of sawdust that still clung to him, a comforting remnant of the character he had played for so long. But his eyes were different. They were the eyes of a man who had seen empires burn. You asked me once why I didn't have any pictures of Mom, Walter said. I told you it was too painful. That wasn't the whole truth. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a photograph. It wasn't a digital print. It was an old Polaroid, the edges yellowed and curling with age. He held it for a moment, his thumb brushing over the glossy surface, before handing it to Chloe. Chloe took it. Her breath caught in her throat. The image showed a young couple standing on a pier in the Hamptons. The man was her father, but decades younger, sharp-jawed, wearing a tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne with an easy, arrogant grace she had never seen in the mechanic from Vermont. Next to him was a woman. She was breathtaking. She had Chloe's dark hair, but her eyes were different, fierce, intelligent, almost predatory. She was looking at the camera not with a smile, but with a challenge. "Catherine," Walter said, his voice cracking. "She looks powerful," Chloe whispered. "You told me she was a kindergarten teacher. You told me she liked to garden." Walter let out a dry, bitter laugh. "I told you that because I wanted you to think she had a soft, safe life. Your mother couldn't keep a plant alive to save her life, Chloe. She was a mathematician, a genius. We met at MIT. I was good with numbers. But Catherine? Catherine saw patterns where everyone else saw chaos." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if projecting a movie of the past onto the plaster. "We built SV Global together in a basement in Boston. I was the face. She was the engine. We wrote the trading algorithms that revolutionized high-frequency trading in the 90s. We made our first billion before you were born. We were the kings of the world, Chloe. We were untouchable." Chloe stared at the photo. This woman, this titan of industry, was her mother? It felt like discovering she was a different species. "So what happened?" Chloe asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "The aneurysm." "That was a lie too, wasn't it?" "It was a lie," Walter confirmed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. When you climb that high, that fast, you make enemies. And our biggest enemy was a man named Thomas Galloway. The name hung in the air like smoke. Galloway ran the Galloway Group, Walter continued. He was old money. Ruthless. He believed that the market belonged to him by birthright. When two upstarts like us began outperforming him, stealing his deals, embarrassing him, he didn't take it as a business challenge. He took it as an act of war. Walter's hands clenched into fists on his knees. He tried to buy us out. We refused. He tried to blackmail us. We laughed at him. He tried to frame us for SEC violations. We proved our innocence. He was losing, and he knew it. So, he decided to stop playing by the rules. Walter turned to look at Chloe, and the pain in his eyes was so raw she almost looked away. November 4th, 1999. It was a Thursday. We were driving to a charity gala in the city. You were home with the nanny. It was raining, one of those cold, freezing rains that turns the roads into black ice. Chloe stayed silent, gripping the photograph. "We were at a red light on 57th Street, Walter said, his voice dropping to a whisper. A heavy truck came out of the cross street. It didn't slow down. It didn't screech its brakes. It accelerated. It hit the passenger side, Catherine's side, at 50 miles an hour. Chloe covered her mouth, tears spilling over her lashes. "Dad, I survived with a concussion and broken ribs," Walter said, his voice devoid of emotion, as if he had recounted this police report 1,000 times in his nightmares. "Catherine died instantly. The driver of the truck vanished. The police called it a tragic accident due to weather. But I knew. 2 days later, Galloway sent a bottle of wine to my hospital room. The note just said, 'My condolences. Perhaps now you'll consider selling.' He killed her," Chloe hissed, a sudden flare of rage igniting in her chest. "He murdered her for a company?" "He killed her for power," Walter corrected. "And I knew, in that moment, that if I stayed in the world, if I stayed Walter Sterling, the billionaire, you would be next. Galloway wouldn't stop until he had everything. I couldn't fight him in the open. He had judges, he had police captains, he had the media, he was too big." "So you died," Chloe realized. Walter Sterling retired in grief. He nodded. "I sold off the public assets, moved the core capital into shadow accounts, and took my 3-year-old daughter to a cabin in Vermont where no one could find us. I became a mechanic. I wore flannel. I drove a truck. I raised you to be humble, to be kind, to be everything Galloway wasn't." "But you weren't just fixing cars in that garage," Chloe said, putting the pieces together. "The basement, the servers. You were working." "I was hunting," Walter said, his face hardening into stone. "For 20 years, Chloe, I have been waging a ghost war against Thomas Galloway. Every time he tried to acquire a company, a mystery buyer outbid him. Every time he tried to launch a product, a patent suit stalled him. I dismantled his empire, brick by brick, from a basement in the woods, I made him bleed money for 2 decades until he was nothing. Is he? Chloe hesitated. Is he dead? He's in a state-run nursing home in Connecticut, Walter said with grim satisfaction. He had a massive stroke last year when his final holding company collapsed. He can't speak, he can't move. He just stares at the wall, knowing he lost. That was my revenge. I left him with his life, but I took his legacy. Chloe let out a long, shaky breath. It was a lot to process. Her life was a lie, but it was a lie constructed out of love and protection. Okay, she said, wiping her eyes. I understand. You did what you had to do, and now we're safe. Galloway is gone. Derek is gone. We can finally breathe. Walter didn't smile. He looked down at the briefcase again. He looked reluctant, almost afraid. Dad? Chloe asked, her heart rate spiking again. What is it? Galloway is gone, Walter said slowly, but his poison. It lingered. There is one last thing you need to see. One last secret that connects everything. Does this have to do with Derek? It has everything to do with Derek. Walter opened the briefcase. He shuffled through the thick legal files until he found a single, crisp sheet of paper. It wasn't a contract. It was a bank transaction record, printed from a database that looked illegal to access. He slid it across the table to her. When you met Derek, Walter said. Tell me about it. It was at the coffee shop near campus, Chloe said, confused. I dropped my books. He helped me pick them up. He was charming. He asked for my number. He was so persistent. He called me every day. He sent flowers. It felt like a fairy tale. It felt like a fairy tale, Walter repeated sadly. Because it was a script. Chloe looked down at the paper. Chloe stared at the date. October 14th. That was a week before we met. Keep reading, Walter urged gently. There were more transactions. Monthly payments of $10,000. A bonus of $50,000 on the date of their engagement. Another bonus of $100,000 on the date of their wedding. The room began to spin. Chloe felt bile rise in her throat. Galloway was losing everything, Walter explained, his voice thick with disgust. He knew I was out there, somewhere, destroying him. He couldn't find me. But his private investigators found a lead on a daughter. He couldn't get to me physically, so he decided to draw me out. He hired him, Chloe whispered. The paper shook in her hands. He hired Derek? He hired a young, morally bankrupt business student who was desperate for cash and fame, Walter said. He paid Derek Preston to find you, to court you, to make you fall in love with him. Galloway thought that if you got married, I would have to show up. He thought I would walk you down the aisle, and his hitmen would be waiting. Chloe stood up, knocking the coffee table with her shin, but she didn't feel the pain. She felt like she was falling through the floor. Every memory of her relationship with Derek flashed through her mind, but now the context was twisted, horrific. The way Derek was so intense in the beginning. It wasn't passion, it was a deadline. The way he insisted on a massive, high-profile wedding. It wasn't romance, it was a trap for her father. The way he raged when her father didn't come. He's your father, Chloe. He has to be here. It's embarrassing that he's not here. Derek had screamed that night. She had thought he was hurt on her behalf. He was mad because he didn't get his bonus, Chloe realized aloud, her voice trembling with horror. He wanted you there so you could be killed. He didn't know about the hit, Walter said quickly. Derek is evil, but he's a coward. He didn't know about the assassination plot. He just thought he was marrying a rich girl whose daddy was hiding money. He thought if he married you, he'd get access to the sterling fortune. But you didn't come, Chloe said. I watched from a surveillance van 2 miles away, Walter said, tears shining in his eyes. It broke my heart, Chloe. Seeing you in that dress, walking alone. I wanted to be there. I wanted to kill him right then and there. But if I had shown my face, we both would have died. I had to let you marry him to save you. Chloe paced the room, her hands in her hair. And then? What happened then? Galloway went bankrupt 2 years ago, Walter said. The payments stopped. And that's when Derek changed, didn't he? Chloe stopped pacing. It was true. 2 years ago, the flowers stopped. The compliments stopped. The late nights at the office started. The criticism began. You're too boring. You're too plain. Why don't you dress better? He wasn't getting paid to be my husband anymore, Chloe said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. The job was over. So he started looking for an exit strategy. He started looking for Sienna. Exactly, Walter said. He used the connections Galloway gave him to get this CEO job, and he planned to dump you the moment he felt secure. He used you, Chloe. From the first cup of coffee to the moment I walked into that ballroom, you were never his wife. You were his assignment. Chloe walked over to the window. She looked at her reflection in the glass. She saw the tears, yes, but beneath the tears, something else was forming. The same thing she had seen in her mother's eyes in the photograph. For 5 years, she had internalized Derek's cruelty. She had believed she wasn't good enough. She had believed she was lucky that a man like him wanted a woman like her. But it was all a lie. He was the parasite. She was the host. He had sold his soul for a few checks from a dying old man, while she carried the blood of the woman who built the modern financial world. The shame evaporated. It was burned away by a white-hot fury. "Where is he going?" Chloe asked, staring at the street below. "The Federal Detention Center," Walter said. "The fraud charges are serious. He'll be looking at 10 to 15 years. And since I froze his assets this morning, he'll be relying on a public defender." "Good," Chloe said. Her voice was steady now, cold. She turned back to her father. "You said you bought this company to save the employees," she said. "And to fix the tech." "I did," Walter said. "Nexus Dynamics has good bones. It just had a cancer at the top. But Chloe, I'm tired. I'm 70 years old. I've spent half my life fighting a war from a basement. I can't run this company. I don't want to run it." He stood up and walked toward her. "This is your birthright, Chloe. Not just the money, the mind. You have your mother's instincts. I saw you in the meetings last week. I saw how you read those spreadsheets. You caught errors the CFO missed. You have it in you." "I don't know if I can be like her," Chloe said, glancing at the photo on the table. "She was a genius. You are the woman who just took down Derek Preston on live television," Walter smiled. "You are the daughter of Catherine Sterling. And you are the CEO of this company, if you want it." Chloe looked at the desk. She looked at the empty chair where Derek had sat, laughing at her, mocking her father. She walked over to the desk. She ran her hand along the mahogany. It felt solid. It felt real. "I don't want to just run this company, Dad," Chloe said. She looked up, her eyes blazing. "I want to expand it. I want to take back everything Galloway tried to steal from us. I want to build something so big that no one can ever threaten us again." Walter nodded, a look of immense pride washing over his face. "Then we have work to do." He checked his watch, the Patek Philippe that had signaled the end of Derek's reign. "There is an emergency meeting of the SV Global Board of Directors in 1 hour. They are flying in from London and Tokyo. They want to know who is taking over Nexus Dynamics. They want to meet the new face of the Sterling family." Chloe looked down at her simple white suit. It was elegant, but it was soft. It was the suit of a supportive wife. "I can't go like this," she said. "I look like a victim." "No," Walter agreed. "You don't." He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Bring the car around. And have the stylist meet us at the penthouse. We need the full wardrobe, the armor." He hung up and offered his arm to his daughter. "Are you ready, little bear?" Chloe took a deep breath. She looked at the photo of her mother one last time. She didn't feel sadness anymore. She felt a connection. She picked up the photo and tucked it into her pocket, right next to her heart. She took her father's arm. "Don't call me little bear," she said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Call me Miss Sterling." Walter threw his head back and laughed, a genuine, booming laugh that chased the last of the gloom out of the room. "After you, Miss Sterling." They walked out of the office together, leaving the door wide open. Behind them, the empty office of Derek Preston began to darken as the sun went down, a monument to a man who tried to play a game he never understood. But ahead of them, the hallway was bright, leading to the elevator that would take them up, not down. The beggar's daughter had died in that office. The queen was ascending to her throne. And that is how the tables turned. Derek Preston spent his life chasing gold, never realizing he was holding a diamond he was too blind to see. He thought power came from a suit and a title, but he learned the hard way that real power isn't about how loud you shout, it's about who listens when you whisper. Chloe didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She reclaimed her life, her legacy, and her dignity, leaving Derek with exactly what he deserved, nothing. Whatever you do, Never judge a book by its cover, and never underestimate the quiet ones. You never know who is secretly holding the keys to the castle. Wow, what a journey. If your jaw dropped when Walter walked into that boardroom, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel. What would you have done if you were Chloe? Would you have visited Derek in prison, or just let him rot? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories of karma, betrayal, and ultimate revenge, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss a upload. We have a crazy story coming up next week about a lottery winner who hid his ticket from his greedy family. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.